Okay, let's get started. I'm going to take a different approach. I'm not going to tell you about our platforms. What I will talk about today is the graduate program that's been running at SEEK for about 3 years. Really, we're going to talk about the journey we've been on from not having a program at all, some of the motivations for starting the program, how we've gone about creating it, and the benefits that we've gotten out of running it. So first, why did we think that this was a good idea? Before we began, SEEK was quite a senior-heavy community. In fact, 88% of the developers were a senior. There was a few problems with this. One was the lack of professional development that we could offer to our seniors. We had quite a few people with aspirations to lead, but unfortunately they didn't have any juniors to lead. Also, the cost to hire and the time to fill was quite high for senior developers at the time. So it's quite difficult in competitive markets to keep hiring in more and more seniors. So we were recruiting for immediate needs. So the current hiring efforts were always about meeting existing business needs, and that translated into getting people in that could implement the changes we needed yesterday, and that resulted in quite a significant amount of seniors that could come in and hit the ground running. And this hiring for seniors bias created an unnatural void in our junior talent pipeline. So we wanted to stop recruiting for now and starting to think about the future needs. So being able to hire junior devs and train them seemed like a really good opportunity for us. We're also hiring in devs that were molded in somebody else's vision. So until this point, we were getting ready-made developers that believed strongly in what somebody else had taught them. Some were quite set in their ways, and it was proving quite challenging to change our culture. So this was kind of the time when we were breaking away from the traditional development monolithic style and moving towards microservices and cloud infrastructure. And we really needed our dev teams to be a little bit more open-minded than what we were seeing. So we thought that graduates could bring in the latest teachings and they weren't wedded to any particular tech stack. Right. And we really did take the build, measure, learn approach. Before we started, none of us had ever run a graduate program before. We started quite small and we've scaled up as we went along. So each year our program starts with a planning session and we talk about what worked really well the previous year and what we wanted to do differently this year. As we went along, we'd call out if things didn't really feel right. And at the end of each phase, we'd hold a retrospective and talk about what we wanted to stop, start, and continue for next time. For each phase, we had a working group of people, which were volunteers across our engineering community, that would come together and design the phase and run and execute on that phase. So these phases were the recruitment campaigns, then the assessment, and then the boot camp. So if you want to get started running a graduate program, the first thing is to recruit your new graduates. This was done heavily in conjunction with the recruitment team and the talent acquisition team as well. So there's a couple of options and we investigated them all. One is the Grad Connections website, which is a really big online portal where most graduates across Australia will go and look for their graduate opportunities. We created a profile up there and advertised our program, and that was pretty simple to do. Another one is the Big Meet, which is a really massive recruitment fair that a lot of universities send their students to. At the time, we were really only looking for 2 or 3 graduates, and we thought if we went there, we'd end up with about 200-300 applications, and we didn't really know how we'd assess that many, so we opted out of the Big Meet. Another option is targeted institution marketing. So the Big 4 universities will let you send out some material about your program to, say, the ComSci faculty. And we opted to do that for 2 of the universities. We also had people go out to universities and run on-site workshops. So they would teach the students about some emerging technologies or practices, And it was an opportunity for us to talk about our program and also gauge interest and find some prospective talent and invite them to come along and apply. There's also the advertising on your corporate site, and which we did, and social media as an option. And that we ran a very brief Twitter campaign to support our corporate advertising. So we got a whole bunch of applications, and the next thing we had to do was assess our candidates. And our assessment has also changed over time as well. In the first year, we focused really heavily on getting best in class, and we would use words like A-grade talent. And we put a lot of emphasis on the academic transcripts. So looking back, this was because it's really easy to measure and it's really easy to quantify. We needed to prove to the business that was kind of reluctant to take on new graduates, that they were getting the best of the best and that their productivity wouldn't be impacted if they were to train up new people. So this emphasis on academic transcripts has really decreased over the years, and now we're even deciding if it's necessary to assess eligibility. So we're on the cusp of opening up to boot camps like General Assembly and GOTO academies, and if we do, that would mean you don't even need to submit an academic transcript. We also ask about 3 or 4 behavioural questions to which the candidates to provide written responses to. So these would focus on their ability to solve problems and also their passions for technologies. In the first year we ran this, we would really evaluate these quite subjectively, and whether it was deemed a good or a bad response was highly dependent on the person that was reviewing the answer. So now they're assessed in pairs, and we have an objective guide that we've created over time for the assessors. We provide examples of the responses that align with our values. So another really easy way to measure and compare candidates is the online standard coding tests, like using Codility or HackerRank, for example. So at the beginning, these helped us to add weight to our proof of excellence argument. They essentially consolidate somebody's coding ability into a single number out of 100. In the first and second year, we would stack rank the applicants, and that together with their academic transcript, we would take the highest performers through to our next phase, which was an assessment centre. This year, we decided to do it a little bit differently. We took a critical look at the way that we were using the coding results. If we continue to stack rank our applicants, because our applications were up into the hundreds, unless you were getting 100%, we weren't even going to look at you. So this was a real problem because there were a lot of people in underrepresented groups that were maybe getting 98 or 95, and we were wondering if, in fact, they would be good enough for our program. So we gave our standardised test to people across the business, so developers of all levels contributed, and what we found was that if somebody was getting 60% on this test and they had a real open mind and a willingness to learn, they would probably be a better fit for our graduate program. So now saying that somebody needed 60% to qualify meant we were opening ourselves up to like hundreds of more applicants being passed through to our next round. And our group of assessors got a bit worried about the load and what that would look like, so we needed to come up with another data point to help assess our candidates. Codifying the resumes is what we came up with, and it turned out to be a very valuable tool. So we had our working group have a lot of rich conversations about the type of person we wanted to come and work with us at Seek, and figure out how their resume could give us that information. So at Seek, there is a really strong emphasis on giving back to the community and also creating an internal workforce that's representative of our really diverse customer base. And yet our main emphasis to this point had been on if somebody could pass or could ace their university tests and if they did really well in this standardised, very algorithmic coding test. And that wasn't necessarily bringing in the people with the values that we wanted to the company. So we're thinking about, well, what if people had to work full-time or part-time whilst they were studying to support their family? So maybe someone had spent a lot of time volunteering, teaching kids to code, or getting involved in industry events. Then how could we recognise those people as well? So it turned out to be actually quite simple. So up until this point, we hadn't really been looking at the resumes. So the opinion was they didn't have any work experience, so there was going to be nothing useful in them. We spent some time defining what we really valued and possible examples of behaviours that might demonstrate that value. So this is an example of the scorecard we came up with. We would look at someone's passion. So if they had side projects outside of university, or if they were involved in tech, say running coding camps, or attending random hacks of kindness. Also their social responsibility. Were they working to make their community a better place? Were they volunteering and doing charity work? What about if they did have work experience in tech? If they'd taken the initiative and had the passion to go and get an internship, or if they had experience in another company in an IBL program, or even part-time work in another industry. So skills in customer service would really help us build empathy for our users. So this is an example of what our scorecard looked like. So if you were looking to implement this, you should really define what it is that you want to see in your company and then come up with a way to evaluate that. This was a really good way for us to balance those extracurricular activities with our high academic transcripts. So now we had our 4 data points and we needed to decide who to take through to our assessment day. So we decided on the minimum criteria for each. So for example, 60% was a standardised coding test, and it was about 4 or 5 points for the resume codification. And we still had quite a substantial pool at this point. And if we did stack rank even based on these points, which was the original intent, we once again would have ended up with an overrepresentation of male applicants. So based on the feedback from previous participants and our previous grads and assessors, this was something that we'd been hoping to avoid. Our first intake was all men, and our second intake of grads only had 1 woman in 6, and we really wanted to change this trend. So this time we wanted our assessment day itself to be really inclusive and balanced so that the women that did come along would feel comfortable and they would be able to show us their true skills without that cognitive weight of feeling like an outsider in a boys' club. So we made a pretty bold move that was unpopular at the start, but we decided to not set quotas, but bring in a 50-50 gender split for the assessment day. So we wanted to invite 20 people in, so we took our top 10 ranking women and our 10 ranking men, and we asked them to come along for the day. And despite the initial reservations, the feedback from the assessors and the attendees was that the inclusive culture of the day was overwhelmingly positive, and this is the format that we're going to continue to run with for this year. So the format of our assessment day looked like this. To start off with, we asked our candidates to come in for a social breakfast where we can talk to them and build a bit of a rapport and get to know them personally. This was introduced in our last iteration, so before that they would simply walk in the door and we'd sit them down and they'd start their coding test, and this method allowed them to ease into the day a little bit better and become more comfortable. So after the meet and greet, we run a group activity. And in this activity, we really gauge, it's kind of like a team building exercise, and we really gauge how people collaborate with each other and how they work in teams. And we focus on behaviours like inclusion as well. So pair programming. Our pair programming assessment has really changed over the years. Initially, we had like a really gamified coding session where the pairs would almost compete against each other to find bugs and find them the fastest. it's really allowed the highly competitive people to shine, and it was not necessarily the only trait we wanted to focus on. So now we rotate coding partners, and they work through several simple coding katas together. They get help and advice from our assessment supervisors, and we focus on their collaboration skills, their willingness to take feedback, and their openness to learning new things. So as we go, we take a look at the code they're writing, we offer stretch goals and suggestions and see how they pick that up and run with it. So of course their coding ability is still really, really important, but every person that came through on our assessment day was able to write code really well, so as it turned out, it wasn't a distinguishing factor. After that, they all have a half-hour individual interview. This was quite a standard HR cultural style interview and allowed the candidates to ask us questions and for us to meet them one-to-one personally. In our second round, we introduced a site tour. So based on the feedback from the students of the first round, they said they would actually like to see what it would be like working day to day. So we take them around the office and introduce them to people. So after the assessment day, all the assessors and everybody involved got in a room and we had a 1-hour session discussing all the candidates. We rated them as exceptional, great, good, or not suitable in these 3 activities. And at the end of that, we found our final 10 and sent them offers. So come to the start of the year, they've graduated, they've had their Christmas holidays, and they come in and they commence a boot camp. So the intent of our boot camps is really to provide the grads with foundational skills to be successful in our cross-functional teams. Over time, once again, the style and the format and the content of the boot camp has changed quite significantly. It runs for 4 weeks, and there is a full-time mentor. We have a large meeting room set up, and we set up workstations for them and collaboration spaces, and that meeting room is their space for those 4 weeks. For the first boot camp, the grads spent 4 weeks working through online tutorials and small coding exercises that expose them to the technologies that we use. In the mornings, they were guided by the boot camp mentor and then left to work individual in the afternoons. We got some feedback from them that even though the content was really useful and did help them when they got to the teams, the days were really long and the boot camp really dragged for them. So next time round, we gave them 1 project to work on. So they had a problem that they could build a solution for, and they were much more engaged. They also got experience collaborating and working with continuous integration from the start. So now the camp kicks off with a product owner coming in and defining their problem to solve. Agile coaches will then come and lead them through ideation and design and help them create a backlog. And each day we get a new technical leader to come in and help them implement a different part of their system. So from database, back-end services, front-end services, build and deployment pipelines, logging, alerting, monitoring, everything. So at the end of it, they've got a fully fledged end-to-end system that they can hand over to the team who runs it. Oh, including documentation. For the last round, we also focus quite heavily on software practices. In our second boot camp, we introduced concepts like pair programming and test-driven development and clean coding as more of an FYI right towards the end. But in our latest iteration, all the work was completed in pairs and they were coached in the best pair programming techniques. They learned source control and integration practices from the start, and they write everything in a test-driven style, and they learn how to collaborate effectively and inclusively. So we got the greatest impact from that third go, where the team practices these methods right from the start instead of introducing them at the end. And we found this third cohort to be the most inclusive, and they're the most trusting, and they're really, really engaged, and they still have lots and lots of fun together. We wrap up the 4 weeks with a showcase. So on the final day, we invite all the teams that will be taking these graduates to come along and see a showcase of their work. This is all run by the graduates, and they talk through what they created and how they created it, and the fun they had along the way. And this was a really good way for us to let the teams know what texts the grads were familiar with and how they'd been working up until now. So we also took the opportunity to train the teams in how to take on a graduate. Once again, this was based on feedback that our grads had not really been getting the support and the inclusive onboarding experiences that we wanted them to have in a way that would make sure they were set up for success. So now we set expectations of how we want teams to support our graduates. So we talked to them about like assigning a buddy from day one, making sure the buddy's available and has their headphones off and can be approached. Invite them to team meetings so the grad's not sitting there going, where did everybody go? We gave them a refresher on pair programming techniques. We told them how to use personal development plans effectively for a graduate, and also keeping the onboarding material up to date. So all that material has actually turned into a how-to guide for these teams to refer back to later. So after the boot camp, they are in the rest of the graduate program for about 18 months. So the intent of this program is to create generalists with broad, shallow range of skills. So we really didn't want people to be pigeonholed early on in their career. And even when they are very passionate about specialising early on, we encourage them to really go broad for this first 18 months. So it's pretty flexible, this program, but generally it's 2 or 3 6-month rotations, and they work in different teams, and they get exposure to different domains and different tech stacks across the business. So until this last round, they had been working as generalist full-stack developers in the teams, though in the past 6 months we've had the grads working in our AI and machine learning spaces with data scientists, also in our security team as AppSec engineers, and our platform engineering team focusing on DevOps. So some of them even found their calling in their second rotation, and now they're like full-time mobile developers. So we let them choose their own adventure as much as we can. Each graduate gets one mentor that's a technical leader from the business, and that mentor stays with them throughout the graduate program. And this provides some consistency and ensures that the grad's being given the right opportunities to succeed, and they're getting support from the teams that they're currently working in. We also offer regular workshops for them to continue their learning. So they can be on things like OWASP and security training, AWS training, and these are all run in-house by our technical leaders. So everything we'd hoped to get out of our grad program, we did, which was fantastic. We really are supporting the future needs of the business. We're creating a really open-minded culture, and we're bringing in really smart and talented people. But what we found to be the greatest benefit were things that we really didn't anticipate. So within the first 6 months of the boot camp, these developers were unrecognisable as graduates. They were working autonomously and shipping high-quality code. And quite often, if you refer to someone as a graduate, someone might turn around and say, wow, I just did not realise that person was a graduate. They're amazing. So we now have a more objective hiring process overall. After having gone through that process of working out what type of people we wanted and how we wanted to assess that, we just moved that to our general hiring process. And we reused all those ideas from the grad program, and now that's more objective. So it was really easy for us to increase diversity this way. We were able to attract a higher number of, or a higher percentage of women through our grad program than any other hiring pipeline. So we've been running several initiatives to level out our gender imbalance, and these tend to take a long time and a lot of effort, and they take a while to bear fruit. But the grad assessment only really took a few quick adjustments, and we ended up with 60% female intake in our last round, and that was without using quotas. The graduates have increased trust and psychological safety across our development teams. So they are so open to asking questions, and they're genuinely curious, and they really get seniors to challenge their own thinking, and they made other team members feel really comfortable asking questions and also not always being right and having all the answers. So this has led to a much higher trust rating in the teams that we've surveyed. They also created a culture of recognition across our development team. So during the boot camp, the graduates really wanted to say thank you to all those technical leaders that gave up their time to come in and run sessions for them. So they got their hands on some kudos cards so they could say thank you to everyone. And this really started a culture of recognition and appreciation, and it's kind of snowballed now, and you'll walk around the office and find kudos cards on everybody's desk. So at initiating coaching opportunities, especially for me, it's been great. So I got to spend 4 weeks teaching them the values and the techniques of the software practices that we were hoping to cultivate across the business. So now they're like the change agents, and they drive these best practices in the team. If they go to a team that isn't practicing clean coding, then they encourage it. And if they kind of struggle to get their point across, they let me know, and I go and help. So win-win. It's really helped us identify our leadership potential. So the assessments and the boot camps required people to put their hand up and volunteer their time and their knowledge, and we could see who was really engaged in leading people and helping them grow. It helped us find gaps in our approaches to training. So when engineers heard about the boot camp and they heard about the workshops we were running, they wanted something similar themselves, which is things we didn't realise before. So now we do things like run front-end workshops for back-end developers. So moving teams became a thing. Team managers are realising that rotating in and out actually strengthens the team and doesn't impact productivity. Before that, the managers were kind of reluctant to let their people move. They just felt like they'd be losing good talent, but unfortunately it meant for people to find new opportunities, they had to go external. So the onboarding and collaboration practices have become so strong that the career opportunities are really opening up at all levels. There's really so many more benefits, and every individual person you ask has a different take on how the graduates have really benefited them. They've certainly strengthened our engineering culture immeasurably. So in hindsight and looking back, we realised that we'd spent about 15 years getting the rest of the industry to grow seniors for us, and it was probably high time for us to start contributing back to that tech industry. So a few reasons why we were happy that we did this. It really made us rethink our senior bias. So this is something that I've noticed. Somewhere in the last decade, most product companies have decided that it was really only seniors that could come in and hit the ground running, and anything less would really result in so much time spent in training and upskilling that the teams would become unproductive. We've actually found the opposite to be true. So hiring seniors with strong, implacable opinions who don't value what we value is costing us much more in the long run. I feel that generally what we do is not rocket science. We're kind of either taking data from an interface and storing it, or taking it from a store and showing it. And there's a couple of challenging bits in the middle. But really, we don't need these uber geniuses to be doing this for us. So well-supported juniors and mid-levels can bring just as much benefit to your organisation as these elusive ninja rock stars that we're all going after. I've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to rush through. So growing the pool. There's so many smart graduates out there that are really eager to work and they're not being given opportunities because we're obsessed with just poaching seniors from each other. So just remember that, 5, 10, 20 years ago, someone gave you an opportunity when you had no experience. So just remember how that felt and give them a go. It also helped diversify the pool. So focusing on junior talent is a really fast and effective way to increase the number of underrepresented groups in our industry. So together with initiatives to encourage these people into engineering courses, focusing on diversity in our candidate assessments will start to level that imbalance. So we all know that women leave tech at higher rates than men. If we can get them in and create an inclusive culture and support their progression, soon we're going to see a really strong senior talent in much higher numbers. Don't just leave it up to the large corporates to do. So generally, the main line of business is not technology, and yet we rely on them to raise the next generation of our software creators. So the product companies need to take responsibility and provide opportunities for people who really can't see themselves working in a telco or a bank. So this is something I hear quite a bit. What if we train them and then they leave? Well, this could happen at any level, really. It's a risk that we always take, but I think it's a poor reason not to try. If you find that you are losing your graduates after the program, try to reflect on why this is, and maybe you can change your culture to give them the opportunities to make them loyal and happy. So we've actually had 100% retention from our graduate intake, so that's 22 people across 3 years, I'm pretty happy with that. So this is half of our latest cohort. So to make sure our Melbourne development community is innovative and competitive in the future, we need to invest in the next generation of developers today. And that's everything. Thank you very much.